Welcome to section 11 of genetics. In this section, we'll be discussing sex chromosome disorders. Let's get started. This is a table of sex chromosome disorders which can be found in section 11 of genetics. There are 3 chromosome disorders that you need to be familiar with. These include Klinefelter syndrome, Turner syndrome, and XYY syndrome. Individuals with Klinefelter syndrome are males that have an extra X chromosome, resulting in the karyotype 47XXY. This is usually caused by non-disjunction, but can also sometimes be caused by mosaicism. I cover mosaicism in a separate video. You really shouldn't have to memorize a lot of these features if you understand the basic pathophysiology. In this disorder, the extra X chromosome results in testicular fibrosis and atrophy, resulting in infertility. Ultimately, this results in decreased testosterone levels and a male with more feminine features than would be expected. A more feminine body shape is synonymous with a eunuchoid body shape. In other words, these males look more feminine because they have larger hips, they're thin, and they lack muscular tone. They can also have gynecomastia and mild intellectual disability, although mild intellectual disability is uncommon. Finally, they're usually tall and have long extremities. They are usually tall because the X chromosome contains the SHOX gene, which is an important promoter of growth. So again, most of these features come back to the idea of testicular fibrosis. Notice that the text in bold is associated with symptoms that cannot be logically deduced based on testicular fibrosis. Therefore, spend your time memorizing the information in bold and recognize that you should be able to deduce the other symptoms by understanding the pathophysiology. I'll talk more about Barr bodies in a minute. The lab findings can also be explained by the pathophysiology. Testicular fibrosis results in decreased Sertoli cells and altered Leydig cell function. Ultimately, this results in decreased inhibin B and testosterone, which then results in elevated FSH and LH levels. I cover this in more detail in the endocrinology chapter of physiology, but let's briefly review it here. This will represent the hypothalamus, the anterior pituitary, and the testes. The hypothalamus releases GnRH, and the anterior pituitary releases FSH and LH. The Sertoli cells, which I'll represent right here with an S, produce inhibin B, which primarily inhibits FSH. The Leydig cells, which I'll represent here with the L, produce testosterone, which primarily inhibits LH. In Klinefelter syndrome, fibrosis of the testes destroys or disrupts the function of the Leydig and Sertoli cells, resulting in a compromised negative feedback system. If testosterone is decreased, then this will result in increased LH. And if inhibin B is decreased, then this will result in increased FSH. So a patient with Klinefelter syndrome will have decreased testosterone, decreased inhibin B, increased LH, and increased FSH. This is a figure showing some of the features of Klinefelter syndrome, which can be found in section 11 of genetics. So again, you can see gynecomastia, wide hips, and small fibrotic testes. Okay, let's do a question. A 27-year-old male presents to the physician with his wife due to infertility problems. They state that they have been attempting to become pregnant for 2 years without success. Physical exam reveals a tall man with small testes. Laboratory findings include elevated levels of FSH and LH. What is the most likely diagnosis? Infertility in a tall man with small testes should immediately make you think of Klinefelter syndrome. Fibrosis of the testes leads to elevated levels of FSH and LH. These lab findings are also suggestive of the diagnosis. Therefore, the diagnosis is most likely Klinefelter syndrome. Okay, moving on. Individuals with Turner syndrome are females that only have one X chromosome, resulting in the karyotype 45XO. This is usually caused by non-disjunction, but can also be caused by mosaicism. It's probably more high yield to connect mosaicism with Turner syndrome than any other disorder. The features of this disorder are extremely high yield, so take the time to commit this to memory. Just like Klinefelter syndrome, many of them can be remembered by understanding the basic pathophysiology. The lack of an X chromosome results in ovarian dysgenesis. The ovaries are replaced with fibrotic tissue, resulting in what's known as streak ovaries. This results in a lack of estrogen, so FSH and LH will be high. The lack of estrogen explains why menopause occurs before menarche. It also partly explains the shield chest. A shield chest refers to widely spaced nipples and underdeveloped breasts. The breasts will be underdeveloped due to the lack of estrogen. Even though the ovaries are dysfunctional, pregnancy can be possible in some cases with in vitro fertilization, so long as an ovary is produced by someone else. Okay, the text in bold cannot be easily deduced based on the pathophysiology, so spend your time memorizing this information. These features include a short stature, preductal coarctation, a bicuspid aortic valve, cystic hygromas, webbed neck, lymphedema, and a horseshoe kidney. The short stature can be explained because the X chromosome contains the SHOX gene, which promotes growth. Therefore, one less X chromosome will result in short stature. Let's look at some images so you can see what these features look like. This is a figure of a girl with a webbed neck, which you can see right here. This is caused by dilated lymphatic channels. Another complication of dilated lymphatic ducts is a cystic hygroma, which you can see on this boy right here. As the lymphatic system becomes blocked, the region in the neck or face can be filled with fluid, resulting in a cystic hygroma. This is a section of the heart showing each of the normal valves, and it can be found in section 11 of genetics. Notice that the mitral valve is normally bicuspid, whereas the other valves are normally tricuspid. In individuals with Turner syndrome, the aortic valve may be bicuspid, so it would look like the mitral valve shown in this image right here. This is a figure of a horseshoe kidney. Notice that the left and right kidneys are fused together, resulting in a U shape that looks kind of like a horseshoe. This is a figure showing coarctation of the aorta. You can see that the aorta is indented right here. If this occurs proximal to the ductus arteriosus, it's called a preductal coarctation. If it occurs distal to the ductus arteriosus, it's called a postductal coarctation. Individuals with Turner syndrome usually have a preductal coarctation. Okay, one final point on Turner syndrome. A Barr body is a condensed X chromosome. The formation of a Barr body is a normal process that occurs as a result of methylation and silencing of one of the X chromosomes. This process is also known as lionization. You should know that because individuals with Turner syndrome only have one X chromosome, they don't have a Barr body. So absent Barr body. And this should make sense to you, hopefully, right? You wouldn't want to silence the only good X chromosome you have, so lionization does not occur. On the other hand, individuals with Klinefelter syndrome have a Barr body present because they have an extra X chromosome. Okay, the last disorder we'll discuss is XYY syndrome. From the syndrome, it should be pretty intuitive that these individuals have an extra Y chromosome, resulting in the karyotype 47XYY. This is usually caused by non-disjunction. Because there are two Y chromosomes, it must be due to paternal non-disjunction. This is usually not diagnosed because the phenotype is mostly normal. These individuals may be tall, have mild learning disabilities, autism, or severe acne. Unlike Turner and Klinefelter syndrome, XYY syndrome does not result in infertility or laboratory abnormalities. Okay, let's do a question. A 17-year-old girl presents to the physician with concerns regarding menstruation. She endorses amenorrhea and is concerned that there may be something wrong. On exam, she has widely spaced nipples and underdeveloped breasts. Which of the following is most likely present in this individual? Diminished femoral pulses, bicuspid pulmonic valve, intellectual disability, or decreased follicle-stimulating hormone levels? Hopefully from the question stem, you notice that this patient has Turner syndrome. We can deduce this based on amenorrhea, widely spaced nipples, and underdeveloped breasts. Because Turner syndrome is associated with coarctation of the aorta, she will most likely have diminished femoral pulses. So the correct answer is A. This occurs because the blood flow traveling to the lower extremities is impaired from the coarctation of the aorta.